Today we have Bill Bercaw, and he's going to be presenting to us. Bill's a sex therapist in practice in Pasadena. His lovely wife Ginger, who's also a sex therapist in practice with Bill, couldn't be here. A little child care event came up, so he knows the stuff. You'll get a great presentation. But we advertised Ginger would be here, but didn't work out today.
The old bait and switch. Yeah.
A little bit. You can just. So anyway, a little bit about Bill. In addition to being a certified sex therapist, he's also a certified sex addiction therapist, and their practice in Pasadena, I believe we have several associates as well, treating a whole spectrum of sexual concerns, and they're a great resource in that area if you need a referral or just professional consultation. They're also authors of two books. One is called From the Living Room to the Bedroom. And is that back there? Yes, it is. So Bill and Ginger's books, The Couple's Guide to Intimacy and From the Living Room to the Bedroom. He's got several here also for sale if you're interested at the end. Their purpose is to help today's busy couples seeking to rekindle passion and connection in a realistic, practical, and sustainable manner. The Couple's Guide to Intimacy presents a highly effective new treatment modality called sexual reintegration therapy that the Bercaws developed. And these resources have been endorsed as groundbreaking by many leaders in the field, and I can attest to that because many people come up to me at conferences and say, "Oh, well, the Bercaw's book says," so thank you for creating it. It's a great resource.
Thanks, Douglas.
Yeah. So today's topic is restoring trust in couples and sexual recovery. So please welcome Bill Bercaw.
Thank you. Douglas, thank you very much for that very thoughtful introduction. It's truly appreciated. And please extend my thanks to Alex as well. Alex was really an inspiration to Ginger and I when we were beginning our careers as young psychologists and young sex therapists and sex addiction therapists. So she was actually one of our original CSAT supervisors. How many of you are CSATs or on your way? Okay. It's the Certified Sex Addiction Therapy credential. Alex is really at the forefront of that organization that does the credentialing. And we were lucky enough to meet her young in our careers, early in our careers. And we're very lucky. She has supported us through the years. She endorsed both of our books. We even put her on the cover of our second book. She gave us such a great endorsement. So today we're trying to do our part to advance the thinking, the understanding, and the clinical practice around a very specific area of couples recovery, which is really our passion, couples recovery. So we developed sexual reintegration therapy for couples about 10 years ago. And what we're going to share with you today is a new model. And it emerged out of our decade-plus years of work with couples using sexual reintegration therapy. I'm going to keep saying we and our and us. This is very much both of our work. We did run into a child care problem about 2.5 hours ago. We have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. They're very active, and Friday afternoon is probably the worst time for us to be caught short. So she's doing the shuttling here, there, and everywhere, and I, fortunately, am here, but I miss her, and this is really just to say I'm not responsible for half of this talk, okay? So, okay. Just to, and by the way, this is also the first time that we're sharing this model with the clinical community. Okay, so you guys are getting it first. To set the stage a little bit, for those of you who do work with individuals or couples where problematic sexual behaviors are an issue, you know what we are in those roles. We're the brakes, okay? People are coming to us with a desperate need to stop. Stop the acting out, stop the chaos, okay? So thankfully, we have treatment protocols. And when those treatment protocols, which are very effective, intersect with client willingness, we can help them stop. But once we've established some success in the braking department, then a whole new world of opportunity starts to emerge. We like to say that it's the leading edge of a new frontier in a foreign land called healthy intimacy and sexuality. Okay? And entry requires very steady resolve. And from us and our clients, really the patients of Job, for us it's trying to steer them through that hazy illusion of false abundance, where it seemed like there was never really enough, and into the warm embrace of what we call sexual abundance, okay, where there is a deep satisfaction in the renewable wealth of sexual experiences to which they can definitively say yes, okay, without regret. Now, complicating matters, of course, are decision points around every corner for recovering couples. For example, do I continue to search his phone and check his email and texts? Okay. Do I continue to agree to have my phone and email and texts searched? How often should we be doing recovery check-ins, and how long will we need to do them? Do I avoid standing next to the attractive woman on the subway train? Okay. Do we go to the beach or the pool and walk among the bikini-clad set? Okay. Do I consider taking masturbation out of my inner circle, and if so, how? Okay. Do we watch that R-rated movie together? The kind of movie we used to take for granted, but now we cross-reference it against 3 different review sites for nudity content. Okay? And if we agree to watch it, what do I do during the sex scenes? Do I cover my eyes? Do I leave the room? And if I do, who would that be for? Is that for my program or for her comfort? All right? And what about physical intimacy? When's the right time to be sexual again? Should we take a break from being sexual? Why could he be turned on with others but not with me? Okay. How can we even talk about sexual intimacy? So these questions really barely scratch the surface. Okay, I see a lot of you nodding, so I know you've come across these. Okay, but what is clear is the road to sexual health is going to be non-linear, and it's going to be often a very bumpy ride. Most often, we're talking about caring not just for a single individual, although some of our clients are single, but also for that individual's partner and their relationship. And the relationship is really where the potential for healthy intimacy, where the greatest potential for complete recovery really lies. So in order for the coupleship to be healed, it's going to require nothing less than a consistently courageous commitment to intimacy. And what an amazing coincidence that intimacy so often happens to be the Achilles heel of so many of the people that we work with. So accepting that challenge to move into vulnerability is exactly what their trauma histories taught them not to do. But it's also what yields the chance for them to really have it all. The benefits of a trusting, respectful, and closely connected living room, combined with a passionate, sensual, and erotic bedroom, okay, all within the same relationship. So breaking is not what our clients ultimately aspire to. It's something much more. Even if they can't quite imagine what it looks like in those early days, weeks, months, even years sometimes. Okay? But once those breaks are firmly set, we can then begin steering our clients toward the same finish line that everybody wants, regardless of acting out history. Okay? It's the integration of healthy sexuality with intimacy, plain and simple. So what's been clear to us, okay, and I'm pretty sure clear to all of you, is that no matter what stage of couples recovery we're talking about, whether we're looking at the living room or the bedroom, there is one variable that stands out among all the others as being most important to that couple's recovery. Okay, should we all say it together now? It's trust. All right. Probably not going too far to say that any recovering relationship is built on trust. When trust increases, partners feel closer to each other. Okay, they're more hopeful about their future. They are more willing to risk vulnerability as they feel stronger with each other. Our colleague, Dr. Ken Adams, do any of you know Dr. Adams and his work? He came out with a concept earlier this year. He calls it crossing the threshold of vulnerability. We're going to be talking more about that in just a moment. But they're more likely to cross that threshold when they're feeling more trusting, of course. And we therapists are always on the lookout for trust, because when we see it, we want to leverage it. Right? We want to push the accelerator and really help that couple to level up to their next position of strength. But when trust decreases, the opposite happens. Okay? Couples feel further apart. They feel less trusting, less hopeful about their future, and they're less willing to risk vulnerability. So what we're noticing is that trust comes in different forms, and these forms come on the scene at different stages of recovery. So being able to define these types of trust and also to help clients understand the predictable timing, the chronology at which they emerge, and also the power of their convergence when they all work together can be very helpful to our recovering couples. So my friend Dr. Steve and I were talking the other day. Dr. Steve is an ENT in Pasadena, and he's always very interested in the work that Ginger and I do, and we're interested in his. So he asked me what I was working on about a month ago. So I told him, we've got this great talk coming up at the Center for Healthy Sex, and it's about recovering couples and how to restore trust. And he looks at me and he says, "You mean infidelity?" I said, yeah, that's what we're talking about. He says, how do you ever get past that? I mean, is that even possible? So I thank Dr. Steve for going right to the core of the matter and really capturing the reality for so many of our recovering couples. For him, and by the way, we use the pronouns, I'm going to be saying mostly him today to refer to the betrayer, and knowing full well we have plenty of experience with people where it's the other way around. But for him, it's usually, how can I ever regain her trust again? And for her, it is, how can I ever trust him again? So our message to these couples is usually very straightforward. Okay? You're right to wonder if trust will ever be the same. And if you're referring to the blind trust, the implicit trust that used to be there, it won't. That's not coming back. Okay? But if you're interested, there's a different type of trust that's out there for you. Okay? That not only could be good enough to rebuild your new relationship on, but that might actually prove to be superior than the blind trust that was there before. Okay? And then we wait for the inevitable question, how? Okay? So to explain, we're talking about a higher form of trust. Okay? Because it's going to be deeper, it's going to be more complex and more layered, as well as more conscious and more intentional. And because of the trauma of the betrayal that's occurred, it's usually experienced as being more valuable also. More valued because this new trust is going to be arrived at only through a consistent commitment to the hard work of recovery, to honesty, to follow through, and devotedness. But also because of that trauma, it's more complicated. Okay? And the complicated, often confounding nature of what we're going to call CSR trust, couples and sexual recovery trust. Okay? That's what motivated us to develop this model that we're sharing with you today. Okay? So we're motivated every time we're working with an individual or a couple who is confused, who is upset, who is stymied because of this one little word with immeasurable meaning, trust. All right, so when people connect with this model, though, it captures the reality, it normalizes their experience, and it validates what they're going through. It shows them where they are in this process, this journey that they never in a million years wanted to be on, okay? But they're in it now. It really helps them to see where they're at. In many cases, it shows them that they're pretty much where they should be or where we'd expect them to be. And it also shows them where they're headed if they keep doing their work. So it can be very encouraging in that way. So they see that there's these three specific components of trust. They can see the timing and the chronology of them. Let's take a look at them right now. There's the three types: verify, witness, and experience. So as we describe each of these different components, I want you to think of them as a pie chart. And I think one of your handouts, it's the couples exercise on the front, and there is a pie chart on the back. Or maybe it's 2 pages. Do you have that? Okay, yeah. Yours is black and white. So that's how we think of it, with each of the components taking up different percentages of that pie chart as the couple goes through recovery. So there's an ebb and flow there. Okay. We're also going to be talking about, as we work our way through these, through accelerants, the things that enhance trust in each of these, and also barriers, the things that get in the way. The first one we'll look at is verify. Okay. So back in the 80s, when the Cold War was coming to an end, a major component of the changes that were occurring between the United States and the Soviets was bilateral nuclear de-escalation. So in other words, let's all agree to reduce the number of nuclear warheads that we have. Now the United States would have loved to just trust the Soviets that when they said we just destroyed 400 warheads, that they actually destroyed 400 warheads. But they had no basis for that trust because the Soviets had been lying, scheming, deceiving the United States for decades. Okay? So what they did instead was said, sure, we'll trust you when you say you destroy those warheads, as long as we can see some proof. Okay? So in foreign policy terms, that became known as trust and verify. And that's the attitude, that's exactly the theme for our recovering couples, and especially the betrayed partner. Okay? She's in the role of the United States, where she has no basis to trust her partner, but she wants to, okay? And she needs to if she's going to move forward in relationship with him. So this is really the dominant form of trust in early couples recovery. We're talking from discovery through maybe the first 3 to 6 months. All right, so this component is all about transparency. This is a challenge for a lot of our betrayers and betrayed partners, okay? So we're referring, though, to all the things that can be proven, basically, and that partners prefer to have access to. So we're talking about electronic devices, iPads, iPods, phones, Kindles. If it has a rechargeable battery and a screen, it's in this category, okay? And then there's what's inside those devices. It's the email, it's the text, it's the photos, it's the internet history, it's social media in many instances. Now, many times the specifics of how, when, and what is going to be accessed need to be negotiated. I'll give you an example of Jonathan. He was a 50-year-old law firm partner, okay? And his wife, he was a little uncomfortable with his wife's request. She wanted access to his work emails, okay? He was uncomfortable. He understood why she wanted it because he had developed a secret email account, actually several, in order to do his acting out. But he was uncomfortable with the idea that his client's expectation of attorney-client privilege might be compromised if she were to just go in and have access to his work like she did with his personal. So they reached a compromise. And their compromise was whenever she felt the need to check his work emails, they would do it together. He would turn away while she typed in her search terms. And if anything came up that looked questionable, she would ask him about it. Hey, what's this one? Okay? Without opening it up, he could usually tell the email address and the subject line, and it's worked pretty well because there's been a relatively few number of questionables for her, and his responses to this point have been satisfactory to her. Of course, we've got polygraph, often used in conjunction with the formal disclosure, and this is to verify that the formal disclosure is truthful, and that there have been no lies of omission, no attempts to deceive. Some of our betrayers balk at this because they don't want a false positive, okay? But our experience is that many more look at this as a great opportunity to welcome an external source of validation, of verification, that hopefully allows their spouse to trust that what they're saying is accurate and truthful. Also, spouse and partner access to bank records and receipts, all accounting, is really important, especially when there's been a history of secret accounts, stashing money, using it to pay for sex. An example would be Rick. He would take money that his mother would give him and keep it in a secret account. And he'd use it to not only pay for his sex workers, but also to buy them gifts. So his wife had a very understandable request. She needed to see all of the accounts that he had, and to have monthly access to the ones that he was going to keep, that they were going to keep separate. Okay. Whereabouts. Is he where he says he's going to be? All right. So that is the question for so many of our couples. Some practical techniques. Some people take selfies or pictures of where they're at, and they just send them instantly. There's the timestamp on it. Some people also use the track location, share location function. Okay, some people use a combination of both of those. We'll talk about this in just a second, about how it can go awry. We also have idle time. So again, it's often helpful for our betrayers to add some transparency regarding how they spend their idle time. Take Jake. He previously used his lunch hour to either look at porn in his office or to go drive somewhere. It was a high pedestrian traffic area where he could objectify and sexualize women as they walked by. This came out in his formal disclosure. So his partner asked him to not only let him know what his lunch plan was, but to call her during his lunch. So what this ended up being was not only another layer of verification, but it ended up being a nice point of connection for them that they never had during that lunch hour. Please let this be the right button. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the accelerants when we under verify. There are many ways in which the betrayers can accelerate the development of trust through the verify component. Now, generally speaking, their attitude needs to be one of stretching as far as they can in order to agree to what she's asking for. And when they can't agree, their plan B is to try and find a reasonable compromise. They also need to remember always that their words mean nothing. The only thing that has weight at this stage of the game are behaviors, actions. They also need to remember that all of this stuff is what's needed now. Okay? It is not necessarily going to be forever and ever, but it is what's necessary now. Okay? And also they need to remember, and this is a big ask, we ask them to trust that if you're able to do this stuff consistently, all this stuff that feels, kind of controlling, there's a darn good chance that if you do it well and you keep doing all your other work, she's going to have less of a felt need for some of these verification techniques as you guys go forward. The last accelerant we'll talk about here is how both partners really need to stay current with each other, especially regarding how the agreements are working for each of them. Okay? So there's a trap here, and that's how easy it is for some of these agreements to start off appropriately narrowly defined and then to morph. I'll give you another example here. Jennifer wanted her husband Michael to use the share location function on his phone, and he agreed. But what started happening after a couple of months is the function was being expanded from a verification purpose to now a timeliness monitoring mechanism. So it was not unusual for him to be on his way somewhere and to get a screenshot, a text, of him in his little car, on the share location screen with words to the effect of, looks like you're going to be late again. Okay? So this came to a head when he received one of these screenshots and messages as he was sitting in his S meeting. And the text said, it looks like you're going to be late. And his response was, I'm here. I was here on time. Her response was, no, I'm looking at it right now. It says you are 3 blocks away. Okay? He says, you've got to believe me. She says, I believe my eyes, not your words. Very understandable. So this example really highlights the danger of being over-reliant on that share location function. Okay, there are barriers in this stage also. One of them is what we hear in our men's group often, I just want to be normal. Okay, but it needs to be reframed because that self-talk doesn't really do anybody any good. So one of the things we say, when they're realizing that they have to do all these things that guys who don't betray their spouses don't have to do, is the reframe is, of course, around the opportunities that you're taking to become more trustworthy, to give her a chance to trust you again so that you can heal your marriage because that's what you want. Okay, and by the way, if you do this right and consistently, you might end up in a stronger marriage than the guys that don't have to do all these things also. We see that all the time. Other barriers, kind of common sense, anything that's not truthful, and also unilateral changes by either partner. Okay, they can't change the agreements on their own. Okay, we're going to move on to the witness phase. And by the way, I'm happy to take questions at the end. We're going to jam through quite a bit here in the next half hour or so. In this the second component of recovering couples' trust, what's most important is congruity between promises and follow-through, especially the kind of follow-through that spouses and partners can plainly see. So when it comes to promises made about treatment, okay, how is the betrayer following through? Is he going to his individual and group appointments? Okay. Does he make time for couples therapy and engage with openness when he's there? Is he attending 12-step meetings? Is he doing it at the frequency that he said he would? Does he have a sponsor that he meets with? Is he doing the homework, the reading, the writing, the journaling? Okay. If he travels for business, is he making a recovery travel plan and sharing it with his spouse? Is he leading when they do their couples recovery check-ins? Is he respecting his spouse's boundaries? These are all things that can be witnessed, they can be observed. They're either happening or they're not, okay? And they all count. So the betrayer needs to understand that his spouse is entirely dependent on him, not only to do all of these things, okay, but also to keep her in the loop if there are any program changes that are either being considered or have to happen. Schedule changes are a great example. Is group canceled this week? Okay, did the boss just put a meeting on my schedule that conflicts with our couples therapy? Okay, the sooner you communicate, the better. We're talking also here under this witness trust about partnering. Okay, things like household division of labor, meals, co-parenting. Okay, basically anything that represents a promise or an expectation to do some act of partnering. And again, everything counts here. Okay. If we had more time, I'd read a passage to you from Rob Weiss's great new book. Have you heard of Out of the Doghouse? Yeah, I think it's a must-read for any of us who work with infidelity. Page 127 is where it's at, by the way, but I don't think we'll have time to get into it. Weiss, W-E-I-S-S, Rob Weiss. Okay. So another source of witness trust is self-care. Okay. It can be reassuring to the spouse or partner to see her partner taking better care of himself. We've got the basics: diet, sleep, and exercise. Setting limits with other people. Even pursuing areas of healthy interest or passion. And of course, many times those areas of interest need to be negotiated because they take time or there's other considerations involved. Okay. And another form of witness trust is good old-fashioned thoughtfulness. Okay. So we're not talking about a bouquet of flowers here to smooth everything over. We're talking about consistency. Maybe it is in the form of little notes around the house, sweet texts, asking how she's doing, asking how can I be helpful. All of this goes to show that his behavior is consistent with the commitment he's made to doing whatever he can to help his spouse feel safe and loved and appreciated. By the way, the key word here is moderate acts of thoughtfulness. Okay? Sometimes we see our guys especially go overboard, which puts the spouse or partner in a really difficult position because it is hard to turn down a 3-carat diamond ring. It's hard to turn down a luxury car, but many times it's really difficult to accept it also. And it feels manipulative because it is, ultimately. Accelerants in this department. Spouses and partners need to respect that the betrayer's work is his own. So this means no snooping in journals or workbooks or recovery materials, no eavesdropping on conversations. The betrayer needs to see all of these different various aspects of witness trust as opportunities. This is a theme we're going to keep hitting on. They're opportunities to become more trustworthy, almost like racking up trust points or banking them. And one of the more important concepts here is leading. The idea is, I got us into this. I'm going to lead us out. Watch me. Okay? I'm going to hold your hope for you when you're hopeless. I'm going to be strong when you're feeling weak. I'm going to make our appointments. I'm going to plan our date nights. And I'm going to own my mistakes as I lead us through this also. Okay? That's consistent with the concept of the strong man in recovery, which gets a lot of resonance in our men's group also. Of course, there are barriers. Any resistance, especially by the betrayer, okay? Sometimes we'll hear, hey, she doesn't get to run my program. Okay? Okay, true. That's true as an absolute. That's true. But is that really what's happening? Okay? Well, she wants me to go to more meetings. Okay. Well, does that really mean she's running your program, or is that another way that she's looking to feel safer? Because then, if it is, then we can talk about that. Kind of going hand in hand with that is a victim stance by the betrayer. Okay, perceiving that all of these different aspects of witness trust really amount to multiple ways that she can catch him slipping up or falling short. Okay, sometimes we'll hear him say, I can't win. Okay, well, again, there may be more to the story there, but it might also be a victim stance that isn't going to be helpful and needs to be reframed. We have ticky-tack fouls. Okay, in basketball, if you're dribbling along and the defender barely puts a hand on and the whistle blows, we call that a ticky-tack foul. Was that really a foul? Boy, that seemed kind of minor. Okay. Not long ago, I was working with a woman whose husband, they had agreed he'd be home at 7 o'clock. And he had called her on his way at about 6:45. He says, I'm on track. Okay, I'll see you at 7. See you at 7. So he gets home at 7:02. Okay? They agreed on that. Okay? She called that a major boundary violation. Okay? And it really set her back. Okay? So again, we have to be ready for that kind of that really black and white thinking that again, it's protective, so it's understandable, but it doesn't help the coupleship. And then finally, we list fading away. This is where people legitimately are slacking off. Okay, their behaviors are not consistent with the commitments that they've made. All right. So here we are, the last component of trust, which we call experience. Now, anyone who's in any kind of relationship, which means all of us, we all have a sense of how it feels to be in relationship with anyone else. Whether it's a business relationship, a family relationship with our friends, and certainly this applies to recovering coupleships. It's that felt sense of the other that has everything to do with couple stability and connection between partners. So this experience form of trust is usually very small in the early stages of recovery, okay? Because after all, it doesn't feel great to be in relationship with this person who just betrayed me, okay? However, when couples do commit to persevering through the hard work of early recovery, and they successfully build trust through the verify and the witness components, it's often the case that it does start to feel different in a good way. Okay? And it's this growing sense of feeling more comfortable, more safe, and more important in the relationship with one spouse that often allows the betrayed spouse to cross the threshold of vulnerability and risk being all in. So I'll go back to our colleague, Dr. Adams, who introduced this concept of the threshold of vulnerability. What he noted was many couples decide not to split up, not to leave, okay? But merely not splitting up does not mean that partners are truly committed to healing and moving forward. But instead, they're basically treading water. Typically, there's one partner who does not want to leave the relationship, but who's also unable or unwilling to put both feet in and really invest in healing. Now, the reason for this is obvious, okay? He or she does not want to risk getting hurt, having his or her world totally turned upside down again. Dr. Adams says that step number one for any recovering couple is grieving the loss of the first romance, basically saying goodbye to the old relationship. Because only then can the couple decide to recommit and consider what moving forward in their new relationship could actually look like. Dr. Adams went on to say that we therapists can often be guilty of unintentionally holding our clients back from crossing the threshold because we naturally assume a protective stance of our clients. We're much more likely to support them in having stronger or more boundaries than we are to support them in taking a risk and moving forward, okay, by committing to the relationship. But the reality is no couple can heal unless each partner has both feet in. And that's a big risk to take on. And we acknowledge that. And there's certainly no negative judgment against anyone who's not willing to take that risk. Okay? But thankfully, we do have proven ways of helping couples to get inside the betrayal and to talk about what it was for each of them. Like emotion-focused therapy is a good example. We have ways of helping couples to really feel like they are building something new together. That's our model of sexual reintegration therapy. So let's talk about what crossing the threshold actually looks like. Here's a couple quotes. I'm going to just pick and choose among some of these. I'm really proud of you for working your program like you've been doing. Why don't you move your things back into the bedroom and we'll see how it goes? Okay. I'm ready to try couples therapy, but it has to be someone my therapist recommends. Okay. There's willingness there, but with some safeguards. I'd like to try not spot checking your phone for a little while. I don't need you to send me pictures of you arriving at the office anymore. I'd like to experiment with a little more physical intimacy, but it has to be my call. I'd like you to initiate our physical intimacy. I'd like to rewrite our wedding vows. So as you can see, these statements come from multiple points along the continuum of couples recovery. So there are actually multiple thresholds, sometimes mini thresholds that get crossed along the way. But many couples do hang out in that kind of an undeclared limbo. They go through the motions of couples therapy. They show up for their appointments. They go to their meetings. They do their homework. They tolerate the expense and the time that it takes without really moving toward experienced trust. Couple of reasons for this. Moving toward experienced trust only occurs when people tolerate the vulnerability that's required during the verify and the witness stages. Okay? And they've got to avoid the barriers, and they've got to get as many accelerants as they can. That ain't easy. All right? The other reason is that shifting to primarily experienced trust necessarily involves letting go. Letting go of the reliance on so much proof. Letting go of some of the reliance on certain other techniques, like polygraph, like recovery check-ins. Okay? These can have a counterproductive effect if they're done indefinitely, because ultimately they keep the couple attached to their old relationship. Okay? So what's involved in experienced trust? This is where we start to see behavioral changes from the betrayer starting to feel more stable, such that the spouse actually begins to trust them more. Okay? So, for example, instead of consistently choosing to watch a ball game on TV, okay, the grandfather, who is my client, has been choosing to go to his grandkids' games, the actual games. Okay, been doing it for about 6 months now, and he's telling his wife, "Hey, I like it better this way. This is great, and I wish I had figured this out sooner." That's a behavioral change, okay? And it helps her to feel differently toward him, okay? That's a big one, because she used to hate leaving the house by herself, getting in the car and driving to spend the day going all around to visit the grandkids at their games by herself. It's also where the betrayer is consistently demonstrating good choices, because they are the results of a recovery-led decision-making process. So for example, instead of staying up late surfing the internet, now he's going to bed earlier and waking earlier and getting into his morning routine, which involves reading and writing and exercise. Instead of weaving in and out of traffic and making the road his personal Indy 500. Okay? He obeys the speed limit, and he's helping his passengers feel safer. So he's also consistently demonstrating to his wife that she is number one. Okay? He's being more honest, even when it's not easy to do so. Take the case of Rob, who told his wife that he had chicken Caesar salad for lunch. He also told her that he lied to her because he left out the milkshake that he had. And he was ashamed. He was ashamed that he didn't stick to his diet, and he feared that she would think less of him. It turned out she didn't, and she actually appreciated him bringing this to her because she knew he didn't have to. But she also knew it represented, you know, wow, this guy's really changing. You know, even on the small stuff, he's telling me. Okay. He's also more vulnerable than before, allowing his partner to know him more and feel closer as a result. Okay. So letting her know when he's scared instead of just saying, "Oh, no, everything's fine." This is a big deal for our betrayers, because this threshold of vulnerability that we're talking about, it's not just her that has to cross it, okay? He has to be willing to risk also, okay? And that's one of the biggest challenges for so many of these guys. He's also staying committed to making amends. How are we doing on time here? I have one client who it got really messy because he acted out within their circle of friends, and they have probably the largest circle of friends of anyone I know. Literally friends around the world. So his wife made a list of all of the friends that she wanted him to call and tell them what he had done and how sorry he was. Okay? So this took probably about 4 months for him to actually work his way all the way through. And there were some that really needed to be negotiated, okay, because they were not easy yeses for him. None of the calls were easy, but just the decision about who actually should be on that list required a lot of negotiation. But he was willing. Also, keeping promises and commitments has the effect of feeling more dependable. But more than anything, it's a feeling of more presence. Okay, more engaged, not distracted, not avoiding, not checking out, as was often the case before. We'll take a look at the accelerants here under experience trust. Risk tolerance, like we've talked about, sometimes doing what does not come naturally involves a little bit of a risk. I'll tell on myself a little bit here as an example. When Ginger asks me, hey, how was your day? Or hey, how are you doing today? It's very natural for me to just answer her question. And that's it. Okay? I have to remind myself to ask her. Okay? I don't know. There may be a little narcissism involved there. I'm not sure. Keeping short accounts, we talked about that before. Consistency. No one becomes trustworthy overnight. Okay? They have to be in it for the long haul. And then we have these different techniques. Emotional restitution, which is often in response to her impact letter where she writes to him about how this has actually affected her. Coherent narrative, where he puts the story of his life together with a special emphasis on how he gravitated towards acting out and betraying. Very helpful to him, and you can make a case even more helpful for her to see that now he knows why. Okay? Gives her more assurance that this isn't going to happen again. Couples intensives can help, and so can SRT, sexual reintegration therapy. The barriers. All right, so the barriers, expecting perfect attunement or perfect presence. Okay, we know there is no such thing. A lot of betrayed partners end up looking for that sort of thing, and that can create tension and distance. I want to talk briefly about overprotection bias and the boomerang effect. Okay, this is when spouses look for data to support their fears that their spouse can't be trusted. And ironically, it's even more likely to happen after a nice moment or day or weekend of connection, okay? Which means they've been more vulnerable. She's allowed herself to get close. It's almost like their brain catches them being vulnerable and says, you don't trust this, okay? You're going to get hurt. So that's the boomerang effect. We'll hear things like, why did you hesitate before you just answered my question? Okay, hey, why didn't you want to be near me in bed last night? So it's very helpful sometimes when we see the boomerang, to even use that language to put it into context for the couple that, hey, this is part of the process. You're going to get close, you're going to allow yourself to get close, and then you're going to react basically against that in a self-protective way. We talk about excessive screen time. Being on devices often works against the type of presence that needs to be enhanced. So that needs to be monitored. And I want to say a word about stamina. Big word in the presidential campaign last year. Stamina. All right. So many times we'll see our betrayers doing really well during the verify and the witness stages of rebuilding trust. Okay? Usually the first 3, 6, 9 months or so. But if they are not getting the kind of experience trust, if they're not getting the kind of things that they thought they'd be getting at this stage of the game, whatever that stage happens to be, then they hit the wall. Okay? Craig's a good example. Craig had been meeting a woman for anonymous sex, or lots of women for anonymous sex, until he got discovered by his wife, Angie, 15 months ago. So he did what he was supposed to do. He got himself into treatment. He set up a program. He worked it. Okay? They got into couples work. It was going well. He showed up for all of their couples tasks, did everything by the book. Then he hit the wall. Okay? So this was despite really having a very supportive spouse. Her commitment to the marriage never wavered. She was one that never threatened divorce. Okay? And she crossed that threshold with him multiple times. But he was painfully aware of how not normal it felt to be in their marriage. okay? How careful he needed to be with initiating sexual intimacy. How it seemed like he didn't have a say in anything. How it seemed like nobody was on his side. How nobody understands how hard it is for him to get up every day, go to his high-pressure job, and make time for all of these damn therapy appointments. Okay? And he's expected to just figure it all out. How, if only she would just say XYZ, it would feel so good to me. Okay? So he became less hopeful, more frustrated with how Angie wasn't giving him everything that he thought she would at this stage. And she began to feel the effects of his neediness and his pessimism. So she described him as more critical, more moody, more distant, easily agitated, and she began to withdraw. And you think he noticed? Yeah. Okay. This is exactly what he was afraid of. All of his hard work would go for nothing, and eventually she'd leave him. Okay. So here's a couple that, as we speak, has their pie chart, the percentages, okay, going in the wrong direction, and they're recrossing that threshold of vulnerability the wrong way. And the only way, really, the one thing that's going to help this more than anything else to get back on track is if Craig can recommit to leading, to be less concerned with what she could be saying or doing for him, and more concerned with what he can be doing for her. More interested in how she's doing, what she might be struggling with. Looking to be her anchor instead of looking to her to be his. All right? And also trying to ready himself for the possibility that she might not be instantly responsive to his renewed leadership, and also to embrace the opportunities that would be embedded in that scenario. Okay, so I think we can all agree this is an amazing model. Let's talk about how to use it. All right. So here's how we use this thing. For us therapists, a big question we often have is, how are our couples doing? Okay, this is a new framework. We look across these three components of trust. We see how they're stacking up. We cross-reference that with how long they've been doing recovery. Okay, and we get a read on the relationship that way. We get a little bit of a different perspective on it. So let's say they've been doing this for a year, no relapses. There still isn't much on the experience trust side. Okay, we start to get a little concerned. That's not a good sign. And as we all know, there are times as therapists we have to help our couples by calling a spade a spade. And we need to be able to sit down with them and say, look, here it is. You're not approaching that threshold of vulnerability, and that's why you feel stuck. Okay, that's why you're coming in here week after week, with more frustrations than victories. And the only way that's going to change is if you're willing to focus on building a new relationship together. Okay, is that something you're interested in? All right, that's a very real conversation, many times a series of real conversations. For our couples, it's similar. Okay, they're asking themselves the question, how are we doing? They're looking to get some read on this. I'm amazed how many times couples are instantly comforted when you tell them, you know what? Look, you're kind of where we'd hope you'd be by now. And that's what this allows you to do, okay, under those specific circumstances. I mean, you're not going to tell them they're doing great if they're not. But they make their own pie charts, okay? And we've given you this exercise here that hopefully you can plug and play. It's very straightforward, okay? You're asking them to do their own self-assessment, okay? And they make their graph on the back. It's very simple. Even I did it. And now they have something to talk about objectively, okay? So what are the known accelerants that maybe we're not getting enough of, and how could we get more? What are the barriers that are coming up? Okay, why are they coming up? What can we do to address them? Okay, so this gives couples a framework for understanding where they're at and what they need to do to make progress in their healing. Okay, so we believe that one of the themes in couples sexual recovery, one of the main themes, is claiming what's rightfully ours. Okay, sometimes it's reclaiming. Okay, so what do we get to do? What do we get to enjoy? All right? And at the top of the list for many of the couples we work with is claiming or reclaiming their healthy sexuality. Okay, they recognize that they don't want to just go back to the way things were. Most couples want something that feels different, than the old status quo. And by different, they usually mean more connecting. Okay? So for these couples, sexual reintegration therapy is usually very appealing because it gives couples a chance to rebuild their sensual, sexual, emotional, spiritual connection from the ground up, and it offers a plan for sustaining it. So when we're deciding when to begin taking a couple through this program, we do use this model to help us decide, are they ready? Okay? So we're not looking for hard and fast numbers, but we are looking for trends, and we want to see them trending toward experience trust. So many times we'll have couples do this exercise multiple times. Monthly is a great frequency, really, because now you've got data. Now you can absolutely see the trends, and it's so quick. You ask them to do this, in the first minute of your session, and you've got data now. Something to refer back to. Okay. So we want to see that trend toward experience trust because that means that they are crossing that threshold of vulnerability. And we really look at SRT as one big accelerant. It's got the upside potential for their emotional and sexual intimacy, and therefore the potential to really help couples feel like they are building something new. Okay? They often say this is a different feeling than we used to have. It's a different kind of trust than we used to have. It's not blind anymore. It's eyes wide open, and we like what we see. Okay. So let's take a look now at some real-life examples. The first slide you're going to look at, Jack and Diane there, they are, they're right where we'd expect. They're 3 months in. They're relying mostly on verify and witness and just a little bit of experience trust. We wouldn't really expect more than that. Next couple, here's Jack and Diane again. They've done a lot of work here. They're still together. They've had a formal disclosure, that's FD. There's been no relapse, okay? And their trend is decidedly in the direction of experience trust. We would definitely start SRT with this couple if we haven't already. Uh-oh, relapse. Boy, how quickly it changed. And now they're kind of back to where they started. Okay, you can see that. Now the experience has been displaced by verify and witness, and they've got a lot of ground to make up. They're going to have to recross that threshold of vulnerability again and decide how to move forward. How's the new relationship going to look this time around? Okay, and then finally, we've got Sue and Steve. All right, they're 11 months post-formal disclosure. They're 16 months after discovery. There's been no relapse. We'd say this couple's in trouble, okay, because they've worked their programs, they have done all the couples tasks, and they don't have that much experience trust to show for it. Okay, a little more background on this couple. They live in separate bedrooms. They have not rejoined their finances. They separated them when all this happened. So our feedback to this couple would be, look, you're frustrated, okay, because that's what we keep hearing. And there's a reason you're frustrated. It's not because you're slacking off in your recovery programs or you're just trying to make things difficult. It's because you're scared, okay? She's scared of being hurt again. He's scared of putting himself out there and getting rejected again, okay? He's tired of asking if he can move his stuff back in the bedroom, for example, because he knows what the answer is going to be. Okay. So as it stands now, we would tell them, things don't look good, all right? You can hang out here for a long time. You've been doing it for 16 months like this. You could probably go another 16. But not much is going to change until you both decide, again, to move forward in a new relationship. Otherwise, you're going to be frustrated. So what would it take for each of you to cross that threshold to move forward together? Okay, we're not talking about more sources of verification. We're not talking about a guarantee that you're not going to get turned down again. What would it take? That's a good conversation starter. All right. So I want to end with a quote from a woman that we've been fortunate to know. She wrote to us about her experience in her new relationship with her husband. Okay, it's a 40-year marriage. 40-year marriage. It was rocked by betrayal 3 years ago. They both consistently work their programs, and they both agree that they're enjoying newfound trust in their experience and in their relationship. So I want you to listen. What she's really speaking to here, she doesn't use the language. She's talking about how she came to find trust, not just in her husband, but in herself. and how that's allowed her to cross the threshold of vulnerability and create a new relationship. Here's what she says. She says, "Today, I don't pretend that life is perfect. What I can say is that choosing to enter recovery has benefited me in ways I never imagined. So much so that I no longer wish for the past to be different. I choose not to waste another minute of life with needless worry, overshadowed only by mistrust. Instead, I've turned the page in my imaginary diary filled with unending regrets and resentments. I seek and quite often find serenity, that mysterious something that I saw in others at my first meeting. I discovered empowerment and said goodbye to a life filled with chaos, goodbye to trying to control what is out of my control. So playing detective is no longer my gig, but I do enjoy discovering joy each day, much of it in the redemption I have found in this new relationship I have forged with my husband. In the past 3 years, he has given me far more reasons to trust him than not, and I will support him as long as he remains committed to his recovery. I find peace in believing that he is now a changed man, a trustworthy, respectable, and strong man in recovery. But if he chooses to step out of his recovery, my world won't fall apart as it once would have. And if I never shed another tear of self-pity or a day ruled by mistrust and fear, that's fine by me. That's a plan I find doable and within my control, one day at a time." All right? So we hope that, I say we again, we hope that this model really helps all of us therapists to start thinking about how we can support our recovering couples and focus just as much on supporting them in taking risks and vulnerability and crossing that threshold as we do to protect and guard against those risks also. All right, so thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions. Yes, in the back.
About Sue and Steve here.
Mm.
When they're, how would you help them get to something that's more of the experience trust instead of, because from what you're describing here, I would imagine when you're asking, what would it take, it would be like, well, I just need to know is where it says he is. And it's like, well, okay, now let's go back to verify. So how?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the kind of thing you'd be looking for that you could build on?
I think that may reveal itself a little bit, and it's probably going to be revealed through some gentle challenging. I think if that's the predictable want, it's very understandable, but the challenge would be we need to get beyond that. Okay, look at all the verification techniques that we already have in place.
And then the witnessing, and like, you've seen this. And
Exactly.
It's been happening for this long. So then,
Exactly. You know, and even posing the question, do you really think that if we add what you're saying to this list of 17 things, is that going to make the difference? I mean, it's not a sarcastic thing, but it's you know, let her kind of come to terms with that. So the gentle challenging, I think, hopefully would reveal maybe just another avenue, you know, where we might be able to make a little headway. I know it sounds kind of vague as I'm saying it, but I don't know that there's any, you know, 3-step plan for making that happen. I think it's really just sitting with the client and trying to hold space for whatever the emerging reality happens to be. And sometimes it is, you know, we don't like to ever, I think, get here, but sometimes it is, you know what? I don't know if there is anything. You know, I don't know if I can move forward. And we're not saying, well, you need to decide right now, okay? But it does kind of help to know, I think, to gain that kind of clarity, even if it's not what everyone would want, ideally. Emails are on the slide, and I'd be happy to consult with anybody, and I know Ginger would as well. So, and please let us know about this model, because it's new, and just like we did with our other models, we gained so much from you know, the wisdom of all the great hardworking clinicians out there. So I'm sure things have hit you one way or another today. Would really appreciate the feedback. Thank you.